issues like race. And today I have an owner of our church, Geoffrey Gilmore, and he is here with Pastor Morgan and I, and we are excited to ask you a bunch of questions. And I want to apologize up front that we are here to learn. We want to hear from you, and we're not meaning to ask dumb questions.
Right.
But one of the things that we have we've tried to set up with these interviews is we've tried to provide a safe place for us to ask honest questions that might be dumb, but that's really because we just want to learn. So on that note, would love to have you introduce yourself to everyone.
Okay. I'm Geoffrey Gilmore. I go to this church, and I have, some of you have seen me bring our twin grandsons and our little granddaughter. My wife and I live in Kenmore. We met in the 10th grade in what she would call the orchestra room, what I would call the band room. She was in the orchestra, I was in the band, symphonic wind ensemble, and I was head drum major of our marching band. And
Who knew?
I didn't.
I want to see you up here drumming on a Sunday morning. That's what I want.
No, drum major, the baton person.
Oh, okay,
We need that on a Sunday morning.
So do you play an instrument in addition to that?
Trumpet and French horn, I played.
Oh my gosh.
Played.
Do you know
Past tense.
do you know what I used to play?
No.
Tenor saxophone.
Oh, okay.
Used to play.
Yes.
I guarantee you are better at the trumpet than I am at the tenor sax.
Okay.
I used to play steel drums in case you ever want to.
Okay.
Steel drum band.
Sounds good. Yeah. We got married after we graduated from university. She went to UC Santa Barbara, and I went to Cal State LA. And we made this vow to each other. Well, we went through, before we got married, and talked about what our plans are. And so we talked about everything. And one of the things was we weren't going to start a family until we had been, and she's going to kill me for telling you this, until we had gotten into our careers and were really settled in our careers for 5 years. And then we were going to start a family. And so we got married. After 6 months, we went to San Francisco to celebrate being married 6 months. And 9 months later, our first son came.
I was literally, how did that work out?
And so one of the things is that I'm a teacher, a retired teacher. And when we started a family, she said she wants to stay home with the kids. And so you have a brand new teacher who's finishing up his student teaching and a family to take care of. But God just took us through all of that really well. 2 years later, our youngest son came. And so we have 2 sons who are now 44 and 42. And it's been a lot of fun, just going through that process with them, and also going through the process of helping to raise our grandchildren.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you started out your teaching in LA.
Yes.
And then you ended up in the Seattle area. How'd you end up in the Seattle area?
One of the things that occurred, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Crash.
Denzel Washington.
Where all the things come together?
Well, it was all different types of people and societies coming together, and the different racial and prejudice issues going on. Those things were happening a great deal in Southern California, and also our sons were only able to be outside 2 days at the most because of the smog and pollution was so tight. And so we decided to go somewhere else, and this area was the area that we chose.
Yeah.
And I applied for my teaching credential before we moved up, and went for interviews, and ended up in the North Shore School District at Canyon Park Junior High.
All right.
Yeah.
And then you ended up retiring from Inglemoor.
Yes. So, yes.
Well, we're going to dive in.
Okay.
We'll ask you about the questions that are at hand. I'll just start by saying, when you watched the news footage of the George Floyd murder, how did that hit you?
To be honest with you, I didn't watch it because I knew that it would hit me hard. And so I decided not to watch it. And I received enough information without watching it so that that picture wasn't there in my mind.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of other pictures that are in my mind throughout the years, and a lot of different kinds of situations that have occurred that hit me hard and have continued to remind me to be vigilant. When I first was hired at Canyon Park Junior High School, our sons were 2 and 4. And one day before school started, the school season started, I went to school to take care of some things that I had forgotten. And the gym, you can walk straight through the gym, not on the court, but just straight through the gym and go to my classroom, which was right over there. And so I had my 2-year-old, my 4-year-old in hand, and I opened up the gym door, but it was open, and I saw people were practicing. So my sons and I start walking across the gym area, and 3 men came up to us, and they said, "We don't want any problems or any trouble." And I'm thinking, I have a 2-year-old, I have a 4-year-old. What am I going to do? And they said, "Why are you even here?" And I said, "I teach here, and I'm going to my classroom." "You're a teacher here?" And, it went from there. So I was able to go, and we went a totally different way. But that was one of my first welcomings to Canyon Park. But as I went through the school year and what have you, I learned a lot about interactions with different people. In Pasadena, our classes, our neighborhoods were integrated. And so there's a lot of different things that I learned as far as nuances about people. For example, I was tested on this at Inglemoor. A student came up to me and she said, "You said that you understand the difference between Chinese versus Japanese and all of that." And she said, "So what am I?" And I said, "Well, you're definitely not Japanese." And I said, you have some Chinese there, but I'm not quite sure what that other part is." And she said, "That's very good. I'm Vietnamese." And I was like, okay. And so she was impressed. And it's just because of us growing up together, there's different things that we learned about languages and foods and what have you. And we were invited into different people's homes and just had a lot of fun and played with different people growing up. And at Canyon Park, it was just white students.
Yeah.
And they had a hard time with me. Students that I didn't know would walk by and they'd say, and I had not heard these terms before, jungle bunny, spear chucker, that type of thing. I was like, okay. So I knew I had a lot that I had to deal with. Sometimes students would...
And this is back in the
1980s. Yeah, 1980s. From 1980 to 1996, I was at Canyon Park. And so there'd be students that would be assigned to my class. They would come in. The next day, they would not be there. because they had been removed from the classroom. There'd be times when I would have a parent conference and the principal would come down as I'm heading up that way and say, "You don't need to come, we got this covered." And so I knew a lot of things were going on in the background. When we get to 1995, my principal came to me, 95, 96 school year. My principal came to me because I was department chair and I'd been department chair of the English department for a while. And she sat down with me and she said, "A person in your department has been accused of 2 counts of physical abuse and 1 count of verbal abuse. And this has been filed with the city of Bothell." And she just talked on and on and on. And so I asked her, "Is there a way that I can know who this person is so that that person can have my support?" And she said, "It's you." And then she got up and walked out. And I was not expecting this. I had 15 minutes before my next class. I called my wife, told her what happened. She spoke scriptures into me, and I was able to teach the rest of the day. I had to get a lawyer because the way they did it, they had circumvented the school district and made it a civil type of situation. And so my union representation and this, I just wasn't protected. And so I went and I got a lawyer, and I sat down with the lawyer and after about a half hour, he said, "You didn't do it." And I said, "I know I didn't. That's what I'm trying to tell you." He said, "You didn't do it. I can tell you didn't do it." And so over the next couple of weeks, I couldn't say anything to anyone. And the different people at the school knew something was going on because of my involvement in the different areas of the school. And but I couldn't say anything. And so what occurred was I went back and I met the district attorney for the city of Bothell. And the lawyer said to me, "You are going to, I'm going to introduce you to him, and then I'm going to leave the 2 of you together." And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "The reason is because the lawyer is supposed to talk for his client. But after he talks to you for 5 minutes, he will know you did not do it." And so what occurred was the prosecuting attorney came, and I was introduced. The prosecuting attorney shook my hand and he said, "All charges are dropped because we know you didn't do it." And I was like, "Oh." And we sat down, and while we sat down and I read through these papers he had for me, and I signed saying everything was dropped as far as the city was concerned, and there were no charges that were going to be charged. The prosecuting attorney and my attorney were sitting there talking about Mount Lake Terrace High School football. And it was just a surreal type of situation because I walked out of there, okay. That wasn't there anymore. But when I went back, the HR for the district said, "We want to tell your staff." I said, "No, I'm telling my staff." And I did. And I told them that I was scared for another teacher at our district, at our school, who was 2 doors down from me, and she taught social studies, I taught English. African American, short, a really strong teacher. And I said, I'm afraid something will happen with her. And 2 months later, we come to school, and she has the boiler room door on her front door, and it's this much shorter. And I was going, what happened? And apparently people came and wrote all kinds of slurs and what have you all over the door. And the custodian in the morning just took the door off and went elsewhere with the door. We never saw the door. But she also was pressed with different kinds of allegations before the school board. And because of what I'd gone through, I was able to help her navigate through that. And so I left Kenyon Park at the end of that school year, and she left Kenyon Park, and other teachers also left because they didn't want to be in that kind of environment teaching. And so I ended up at Inglemore. And at Inglemore, I did not realize, well, I guess I did realize I was extremely uptight. But at Inglemore, I had the room and the safety to be me. And it took 2 or 3 years to do that. And I had a student of one of my colleagues from when I was teaching at Kenyon Park. And she said, you are a lot more relaxed, a lot more free in the way that you are teaching and the way that you're going about things. And I said, yeah, I can feel it. And I mean, there's other kinds of situations that have occurred as well. When we talk about different kinds of racism and what have you, and the fact that it's systematic, I think one of the things that people don't understand is what that means or what it looks like. And earlier I showed you pictures of my wife, and my wife is a CPA, and she took the CPA exam, passed it the first time. She's brilliant.
She went to UC Santa Barbara. That's impressive.
Yeah, and she's just phenomenal. She wears her hair, at the time she was wearing her hair in locks, and the thing that was occurring is that there are laws, even today, that ban natural hair. Like your hair is natural. Your hair is natural.
All natural.
Yeah. And
Morgan has the same hair do you have.
yes. But the fact of her wearing an afro or wearing curly hair or something of that sort, that was not considered professional. And so she was working on an audit for her firm that was helping her get her license because she had to have 2,000 hours of work that she had to do. And so she was working for a black-owned accounting firm, and she was working on the audit for Metro, the transportation. And the big audit firm that was overseeing the whole thing no longer exists for various reasons. But one of the people at that firm came up to her and said, this particular firm is not hiring minorities because our clients don't feel that they are professional enough. And then when you look on the books and you see that our hairstyles are banned, why? Because it's seen as threatening or not professional or dirty or what have you. That's part of it. You know, I mean, how do you fight that? And so when people say we need to pull up ourselves by the bootstraps, we've done that, and we continue to do that over and over and over again. And one of the things that I've done, and my wife has done, is we've taught our sons growing up, you're going to be taking courses. I mean, they went to Seattle Prep, and they went to the universities that they went to. One's a Cougar, and the other one's a Husky. The Cougar...
Cross divided.
Yes. The Cougar, for those people who are going to be watching this and seeing it, I went to 10 Cougar Dad weekends because he went all the way through, and he had a double major in his bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology. His PhD is in clinical psychology and education administration. And he is currently at California State University at San Marcos. He is Associate Vice President of Academic Student Services, and he's worked hard to get there. But there's been a lot of different hindrances to him getting there. But we taught both of them, there will be laws and rules that you have to follow. Follow those. When you get to your goal, those rules are going to change. Change with them and follow them. Those rules will change again. Follow them again. They're going to change again.
So define what you mean by rules. Do you mean rules, kind of unspoken rules when you're a black man?
There's unspoken rules as a black person, and there's also policies that start being placed in front of us that weren't there before, or that are very specific to us, but written in such a way that we can't say that they're
It feels like a direct attack.
It is. Well, another thing in looking at systematic is I'm looking at these pictures of these different people on the Capitol steps with rifles and with guns and with rocket launchers on their back. If I drove up in my truck with, I don't have a truck, but if I drove up with a rifle displayed in the back on a rack, and I have the licenses and what have you for that, I would be stopped, I would be pulled out of the car, I would be cuffed, and by the time I woke up, then I would be asked questions. But it's assumed that I'm threatening. Those are, and so, you know, those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. And those are the kinds of situations where we teach our sons and our grandsons, this is how you act, this is what you say, this is what you don't say, this is what you do, in order for them to know and to be protected.
I wanted to just ask a question specifically in regards to your relationship with your grandkids, because obviously, you know, they're young. How old are your grandkids now?
11.
And then the granddaughter's 2. 11. So they're right at the age where they're seeing this. They understand, like they get it. They're not dumb, right? Like they know what's going on. What are you telling your grandkids right now? Like what wisdom are you giving them? What are you speaking to them? What is their comprehension when they see things like this? What are the conversations you're having with them?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is we're sharing with them where they come from as a people. Where do we come from? Very specifically, their paternal grandfather, my wife's father, is no longer with us. He's passed on. But, you know, we have his flag on display in the display triangle with his picture there. Her brother also was in the military. We have his also displayed. And in our guest room, which our sons call their room, there is a plaque regarding my godfather. He was one of the Tuskegee Airmen. And but that was something that he didn't really talk about. But we have pictures of him and all of that as a Tuskegee Airman. And just the different kinds of history that has not been talked about. For example, the Buffalo Soldiers. You probably have never heard of Buffalo Soldiers. And
song.
the Buffalo Soldiers were slaves that after the Civil War wanted to continue to work and be a part of the military. And so with that being said, there was a 9th and 10th Cavalry in the West that was established. And they were the ones that were keeping the West safe, basically. And when there were different types of major Native American attacks, they were the ones that were fighting for that control of that area.
So you're really wanting them to understand the roots of where they came from.
Yes.
And then what does that look like as you begin to bring that into the context for today and what they see happening in front of them? You know, what are you, I mean, I just can't like get over trying to like help a young kid understand why they are being treated the way that they're being treated, why these things are the way that they are. I mean, what do you say to an 11-year-old boy who's trying to comprehend these things and why their family has gone through the things they've gone through and why they're facing the things that they've gone through?
One of the things that we do is we show them videos like Eyes on the Prize. It goes through the civil rights movement. And so they're seeing and hearing from other people what is going on and then commentary why it's going on. And there's different songs, there's different poetry that refers to us being resilient. These things are happening, but still we rise. And so it's those are the things that we use. And when we go to Black gatherings, celebrations, what have you, the national anthem is sung, and the Black national anthem is sung. And the words of the Black national anthem really help them to see this is who we are, this is what we're about. And the peacefulness of interacting with people and what have you is what we're about as a people. And yeah.
So when you, sorry, I'm looking something up to know what to ask you. Obviously, I'm humbled and embarrassed and ashamed by what happened to you at Canyon Park Junior High in those years. Would you say it's gotten better? Has it improved?
No. It hasn't. It's just been a little bit more, well, over the last few years, it's become much more overt.
Talk about that a little bit, because I think that's really interesting what you just said. What do you mean by overt?
Well, as you look at people putting on Ku Klux Klan hoods and going shopping,
Sure.
you know, or
In this area?
in this area, well, but it's basically the same type of thing because of there's name calling that's going on. There is just a type of disrespect that is, you know, something is said and the person keeps going, or there are types of things like being said, you guys take up the space that other productive people could be using, you know, those kinds of statements. And just helping our grandsons not take that to heart.
Yeah.
our oldest son, who has a PhD, we got a letter from his second grade teacher. And this goes along with today. But we got a letter from his second grade teacher saying that he has an F in science. And as I read the letter and I read the nuances of what teachers say, I said to my wife, I would like to keep my job. I'm going to let you take care of this. And she read the letter. She didn't read it the same way. And she wrote a letter back saying, I'd like to have a conference with you tomorrow. And the letter came back from the teacher saying, I won't be able to have a conference with you for a couple of weeks. And that type of performance is expected of a person like your son. And my wife, that was all that it took. That's all that it took. Went totally ballistic, but very calm. You would not know she was ballistic. She was seething. She wrote a letter back. In the letter that she wrote back, she wanted put into his files as well. And she contacted the principal. And I got a phone call saying that there was a meeting at the end of their school, and my school wouldn't be out. And so I went late to the meeting. But when I went to the meeting, I'm sitting there and they're all talking. And I'm listening and I'm listening and I'm going, okay, the science project that you're talking about, or the science, is that the geology science work that you were doing? Yes. And you have all of these assignments on geology? Yes. And that's what she's saying, yes to all of these things. And then I said, okay, and so if a person finishes all of those assignments ahead of time, that person could do an extra credit project. And she looked at me, she goes, yes. And I said, and that extra credit project could be, and I described an extra credit project. She goes, yes. And I said, and if that person finishes that extra credit project, that person could do a second extra credit project. Then that extra credit project could look like and be this. And you heard this, yes. Because what I just described was what we had at home, his work and his 2 extra credit projects. And she wrote saying he has an F. But we had to monitor that. The same thing occurred when he was in 5th grade. And we had to constantly monitor that.
First off, he did extra credit science projects as a 2nd grader?
Yes.
Your children are better than me.
But those are the things that we're working with.
Yeah.
And
you know, it's just a sliver. I mean, but that's just an example of the broader scale of what we're talking about.
You're friends with Curleen.
Yes.
And obviously, Curleen, speaks incredibly highly of you. Curleen posted something this morning, and I'd never heard it before. And he made a comment about Francis Scott Key, who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, and he made a comment that he was known for having slaves and actually advocating for slaves. I'd never heard that. So I thought, let's see if that's true. And so I read it, and it's just clearly on all history books. You hear all these stories about him. And so here I am, a white guy that, I grew up kind of in this area. My wrestling coach taught at your junior high school for high school. I just had no clue any of this. And then I'm reading about Francis Scott Key, and how do you help guys like Morgan and I? That we love people. We are for everyone. We had no clue you and your family was experiencing things like this.
When I was at Kenyon Park Junior High, I had a person who came up to me, a white guy who came up to me, and we became friends and we talked. And we were at an assembly celebrating the first Martin Luther King Day holiday. And the choir was singing "We Shall Overcome." And he goes, oh, I've never heard that song before. And I looked at him and I said, wait a minute, you're a history teacher. What do you mean you've never heard that song before? And so as we went through all of these years, that white guy and I have been accountable to each other. And we've had this relationship all of this time. And to answer your question, having conversations. And the hard part of it is having conversations where you know it's going to be hard, but you're willing to be vulnerable. You're willing to be hit between the eyes, but still come back and say, I want to learn more, I want to know more,
Yeah.
and to ask those hard questions, but to have those conversations. And that's what he and I have done. Because there's certain things I go, why do you do this? What are you thinking? And he said, well, it's just the way things are and the way things, and then I tell him, this is how what you're doing affects me and my family. We were listening to KCMS, and we still listen to KCMS. We are, Spirit 105.3, and there was a little thing that they put on saying, this young lady, she just has such a special and sweet heart, and she said something like, I'm not white, I'm not black, I'm just Kaylee. And, that's cute. But my wife wrote them a really nice letter saying, for us to say that is very dangerous. And because when we walked into any place, we are seen as black. And there's all of these assumptions. We don't know which one we're going to have to deal with, but there's all of these assumptions we're going to have to navigate through. One of the reasons why we are here at this church is because you're welcoming in an authentic way. And I feel good bringing our sons here, our grandsons here, and our granddaughter. There are places where we have walked in, we're there for about 10 minutes, and we're like, oh, it's time to go. The conversations that we have to be willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we need to think about as well is that it's not my responsibility or the responsibility of black people to do this. And so I'm going to use an example.
Is this the one you warned me about?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
You warned me about this ahead of time.
Curleen, in his interview, talked about intermingling, and that's what he kept doing this, and talked about intermingling. In a response that says, okay, Curleen, get your friends together and I'll be there, is not what he was talking about. What he's talking about is, you get your friends together, you get your friends together, I get my friends together, and we all come together, and we all talk, and we all have those types of conversations. And that is just one of those little nuances of situations that we need to be aware of, and that we point out.
So for me, you brought this book, the book White Fragility, and this was recommended to me by some gals in our church, and so my wife and I listened to this when we were on a road trip. And I would say, like, at first I had a hard time. I think I had a hard time with the tone of the book initially, and then I started stepping back and I started saying, this is what this person is saying. This is their perspective. And then when I started viewing it from that point of view, because like I kind of live by this motto, seek to understand before you're understood. And so as I was listening, thinking, this person, I understand their perspective. I see where they're coming from. And then it really started opening my eyes to kind of the story that you shared earlier. Like, I would have just never assumed that something like that would happen. Partially just because I just assume everybody thinks the way that I think, but I have been transformed by Jesus. He's transformed the renewing of my mind, and I had to acknowledge that I don't think like the average person thinks. So my challenge, this is me just being very transparent, is I'm trying to help other white guys in their 40s like me see the world from not their own perspective, and it's complicated.
Very complicated.
So when I say things to Curleen like, hey man, get your buddies together, my buddies don't know that they need to be in that conversation. And so I acknowledge that I want to want to learn, and I think that's how I can help them. But I'll do a better job with that. I'll make that happen.
But it's, again, this is like an example of being vulnerable and hearing and at least considering it.
So what would you say, a couple more questions, and honestly, Geoffrey, this has been unbelievable. We have to have you back. I felt the exact same way with Curleen too. I feel so bad that I haven't hung out with you more. And I spend all my times waiting anxiously for your grandkids to come in because I love high-fiving them on Sundays. So I want to hang out with you more, as Morgan and I said we want to take you to coffee and things like that. But how is our church doing?
What do you mean by that?
I'm just saying, like, so you attend this church. You attend this church for a reason. You kind of hit on it a little bit, but how is our church doing? What could we do better?
It's complicated.
Right when I ask that question.
It's complicated because it's not just black people that you are going to have to think about. It's other people of color that you also have to think about, and there's various dynamics that are there. But there have been a couple of times when a person has approached me and said, your grandsons were being very aggressive and threatening. And I'm like, I can't imagine that. And so I talked to them and I said, okay guys, and they didn't know what was said. I said, tell me about what happened today. And they were like, well, we just were playing and this happened and that happened. And I said, and then I asked very more specific kinds of questions. And they pick up on, did I do something wrong? And I said, no, just tell me what happened. And it's just the way that they're playing the same as the other kids, but sometimes it's seen as being more.
Yeah. And it wasn't just boys being boys, it was different. The perception.
Yes. And so...
that's good to know. We need to do training with our kids workers.
But the thing is that your kids workers, our grandsons love them.
Yeah.
And they love being involved. And that's why you see them running in here. Because they really enjoy.
I thought it was because they wanted to high-five me.
That's part of it. I'm sure that's part of it.
But that's that. But I think more than anything else is once the conversations start occurring and things are happening here, you'll be attracting other people as well.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one last question. And in all seriousness, I can't speak for Morgan, but I'm going to. But this has been very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been very eye-opening. I'm sad to say it's been surprising.
That's why I talked to you ahead of time.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about that part.
Okay.
Your story was surprising to me, and I would say I am just ashamed when I hear the story that those things happened, and it happened in our decade even. It's just it's bothersome, and it lets me know that we have to fix this world for our kids for sure. All
Okay.
that to say.
Okay, I'm going
Go
to
ahead.
interrupt you on that. Last year, based on what you're saying, there's also work that I have to do. Woodinville, Washington. I'm in the Starbucks of Woodinville, Washington. I'm in line. There is a Snohomish County sheriff standing over there looking at me. And I'm thinking, what did I do? And all of these things are going through my head. What if he starts walking over towards me? What am I going to do? I mean, I don't even know what is going on through his mind. And so I'm going through all of this. So by the time I order, I have to walk over and stand somewhat near him where the drinks are. And he's still looking at me. I mean, unabashedly looking at me. Like you're looking at me and like you're looking at me. So it's not look at me and look away.
He wasn't looking
me.
at you like, I think that was one of my junior high school teachers or something.
When I walked over there and stood there, he said, "Are you Mr. Gilmore?" And
Wow.
I could have melted.
Yeah.
Because anytime that is said, that means that person was one of my teachers.
Yeah.
But again, the fear
Yeah.
and the concern, because not all of my experiences have been like that. I've been stopped in my own community. What are you doing here? I live here? You know, that type of thing. And I have my wallet, I have my hands up, I have my wallet out. Can I pull and give it to them? Oh. You know, that type of thing. And
Well, you saw the purity of my heart. And I immediately thought he recognized you as one of his teachers.
yes.
So what can Morgan and I do better?
Talk to your friends. And the more that you talk and share these perspectives, the more pushback you're going to get. But it's going to be a pushback with someone who knows that you guys think alike. You think the same as that person you're talking to. And then helping us to intermingle.
Yeah.
Because one of the sermon series that you had when we were over by Boeing Field was walk across the room. You know, and that's what it is. That really is what it is.
Did you remember that I did that sermon?
I do remember.
Okay, good,
You
good,
let me
good,
speak
good,
that on message on that series. I think. Jeffrey, can I ask you one more question? And
Yes.
and I honestly I feel almost weird asking this question, but you know, there's so many weird things happening in our area. Like I'm just thinking of what's happening on Capitol Hill and the protests that are happening. I've just wanted to ask this question to someone like you before: is do you feel advocated for through the types of things that you're seeing, or do you feel like the message of what needs to be spoken is being diluted by some of the things that are happening? Does that question make sense?
Yes. It's a double-edged sword. There is some interruption to the message or static that is being placed on top of the message to divert attention. But but finally that message is resonating with a lot more people. Just like the kneeling during the flag salute, a friend of mine asked me, we talked about that. He says, I really have a problem with that kneeling. That person is not being patriotic and so forth and so on. And that person, he just needs to find another way, or we need to find another way to protest to get our message across. And my response was, kneeling, isn't that a form of being submissive? A different form of giving attention and honor? So how is that disrespectful? And that's all I said. And that person thought about it for a while. And then we talked about it a little bit more.
Well, thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Venture Church, thank you for watching this. I hope you are learning as much as I am. And we'll see you soon.